Welcome to the class in this 2020 presidential year, which I've seen many presidential elections. First of all, I'd like to start off by pointing out that there's no truth to the rumor that I attended George Washington's inauguration. I did cover the Constitutional Convention of 1787. However, I tell people I've spent my whole career listening to political speeches, so you don't have to. I've covered national, local, and state politics throughout my career. I was a reporter at the local, state, and national levels for 40 years, and then have been a teacher at George Mason and at American University and at Georgetown since that time. And I enjoy working with people who are interested in learning about politics and political science and news media. And I've been following this presidential campaign quite closely because primarily I've been teaching a course on it at the same time. So I'm teaching a course at American University on the 2020 presidential race as we speak. And we are following the race day to day. The way I have the students, each student has one news organization to follow for the entire semester. And they're supposed to keep up with the race through that one particular news organization. Each one has a different one. At the end of the semester, they're going to be able to assess how good a job that particular news organization did in covering the presidential race. This is not the usual presidential race. It's quite tumultuous, not only because of the candidates, but also tumultuous because of the conditions that we're engaging this campaign in at this particular time. We have the pandemic, which has upset everything and made everything that we thought was standard go out the window. The hard part of covering this campaign is that things change by the second, not by the minute, not by the hour, but by the second. Things go on and things keep happening. Just as the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg just has come along, is one more thing to come along in this presidential campaign that causes us who are following it closely to kind of throw the playbook out and start to retool it again. Where are we in this race? That's the first thing that we should talk about is where are we? Where does the race stand at this particular time? And what I'd like to do is try to show you some data. You should be seeing on your screen right now an electoral map of the United States. This is the latest electoral map. Is if the election were being held today, here's how the race is shaping up. The dark red states being the states that Trump has in his back pocket. The dark blue states being the states that Joe Biden has in his pocket. The lighter colored states, the light blue ones are the ones that are leaning toward the Democrat, but are not solidly in the Democrats' corner yet. And the light red ones are the same for the Republicans, though, leaning toward the Republicans, but not safely in the Republicans' column yet. And then the gray states, as you can see, are the battleground states, the states that are toss-ups, the states that could go either way. And what happens in the next month and a half of the election campaign will be pivotal in this whole race. Now, if we were to look at the race at this particular time, in terms of electoral votes, you could see from the big states, California and New York, for example, Massachusetts, heavily populated states, Illinois, those states are pretty heavily into Joe Biden's column. And Joe Biden does have a solid electoral college lead at this particular time. You need 270 electoral votes to win. So, however, Donald Trump has very little margin for error. He has to really kind of run the table in those battleground states, the Pennsylvanias, the Ohios, the Michigans, the Wisconsins. Those states are really pivotal, and you can tell that they feel that they're pivotal because Trump has been in Wisconsin, in Minnesota, and in Pennsylvania in recent days. They know that those states can go either way, and they have to campaign pretty heavily in them. Now, you won't see Trump travel out to California, and you won't see Joe Biden travel into Tennessee. They know that they're not going to spend their time trying to get votes that they can't get. So, but if you look at these numbers and the electoral votes here, California's a 55 state, 55 electoral vote state. New York a 29 electoral vote state. Those are two big states that he has in his back pocket already that gives him 81 electoral votes, 84 electoral votes. And so that Trump doesn't have that kind of margin. He has to add these little states up. They're all smaller states. And this is one of the reasons, and this is an important point. There, you hear a lot of discussion these days about we should get rid of the electoral college and just have a straight power vote. Whoever gets the most votes wins. To understand why the electoral college was created, you have to go back to the Constitutional Convention that I earlier mentioned in 1787, when the delegates from the 13 states got together in Philadelphia to draw up a new constitution. As they drew up this new constitution, the first thing happened was that they decided what kind of a legislature will we create? And that legislature that they were going to create would be based upon, the number of states that they have, and then what the population of each state would be. You would get, the bigger your population, the more representation you would have in Congress, the one house legislature. They thought they were going to create a one house legislature. Well, the small states balked. Delaware, South Carolina was a small state at that particular time. Massachusetts was a small state. New Hampshire was a small state. Actually, was Vermont. And they balked. They said, "Wait a minute! If the legislature becomes just based on population, we would have no voice at all. We small states will have no voice at all." So they had to come up with a compromise, and they called it the Grand Compromise, capital G, capital C, Grand Compromise, in which they created two houses of the legislature, one based upon population of the states, and the other based upon the every state having equal representation, so that you have a Senate where every state, whether it's Rhode Island or California, they have two senators. And then in the House of Representatives, the biggest states have more representatives than the small states. And so that, battling it out, so legislation has to pass both of those houses. So therefore, the small states got a say in the whole process. Same thing comes up with the Electoral College. The creation of the Electoral College was pretty much the same part of the debate. The debate being that if we just have a power vote, the voices of our voters in the small states won't matter. And so therefore they created this Electoral College in which they tried to even it out by appeasing the small states, creating an Electoral College, and giving the small states some say. And so that in order to win, you'd have to get a majority of the electoral votes, and the electoral votes are based upon the population of the state. As you can see, if you look at California there on the map, 55 electoral votes for California, 29 electoral votes for New York, 38 electoral votes for Texas, 29 electoral votes for Florida. Those are heavily populated states. They have a lot of electoral votes. The small states have very few electoral votes. Look in the middle of the country, South Dakota and North Dakota, 3 each. Nebraska, 4. Wyoming, 3. Idaho, 4. Kansas, 6. But those particular states, those people in those states would not be willing to give up their power if we were to go to purely a popular election in which whoever gets the most votes wins. So changing the Constitution to do that would not be easy, since ratification of the Constitution would require, ratification of an amendment to the Constitution would require 2/3 vote of the states. Chances are you're just not going to get it done. Now, there have been some people who've thought that there's a way to get around that, but you can imagine what kind of a fight that would set off in the Supreme Court. You think Supreme Court fights now are pretty nasty. Just wait until they would try to change the Electoral College. So if anybody has, feel free to jump in with a question at any particular time, but I'm trying to sort of lay the groundwork as we go out and look at this presidential race, which is a very hotly contested race. If we were to look at the electoral votes right now at the polls right now. I think we've got here. Um, let me.
You do have one question.
Okay, go ahead.
Barbara Mewborn asks, what are your thoughts on the cap on the number of electoral votes in larger states? It doesn't seem fair to voters in those states.
I don't have it. I have no. As far as I'm concerned, if the electoral college, if the population changes to such a degree that you need to raise more electoral votes for the heavily populated states, as long as it's distributed fairly, I would have no objection to that. But I think that naturally the small states would see their power being watered down even more if we didn't reapportion. But we have to. The reapportionment would be based on census numbers, and again, to do the change, that would take a lot of legislation, and I think that there would be a lot of fighting. So I think that the big states do want to do that. Um, whether it can happen, it can be easily done without the small states uh, filing suit. Um, that's an open question.
And Arthur Lerner asks, what state will give us an early clue on election night?
Oh, any of those states that you see in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, especially Ohio. If Ohio were to go Democrat, you probably would say, because Ohio is right now, Trump is leading in Ohio slightly, but he's still leading in Ohio. If he were to lose that state early on, and it was not a close and then you see that, then you could probably say Trump is going to lose. On the other hand, you can look at Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin and Minnesota. And again, if Biden is not doing well in those, you say, well, those are the states. Both we'll know with those battleground states. Now, I see Texas is put in the toss-up category at this particular time. I don't think it's going to end up in Joe Biden's pocket. If Texas goes Joe Biden, everybody's going Joe Biden. Same thing with Florida. If Biden wins Florida, there's very little in the electoral map for Trump to come up to 270 electoral votes. So some of those gray states will be the key. Look at those gray states on the night of the election. Now, if they're running very, very close at midnight, we don't still haven't come. We come to midnight, we still don't have a leader, a winner. Those are the states that are going to be the pivotal ones. There's no question about it. For the question.
Yes. David L. says, I think Maine will split their electoral votes on voting districts.
Yeah, they do. They're the only state that does that. They split their electoral votes based upon their congressional districts, and so that they might do that. And the indication right now is that they might be doing that. Yes.
Bonnie Nelson says the Electoral College asked for information in 16, and Mitch McConnell said no. Considering the way it was designed, why not give them security clearance to hear both sides?
I'm not familiar with the questions. Could you ask that question again?
Bonnie, can you give us a clearer question? Barbara Mewborn asks, how can we trust the polls after what happened in the last presidential election?
Well, their polls. All polls are not created equal. And really, the national polls in the last election were not particularly inaccurate. Keep in mind that the final polls that were coming out were national polls. They were not state by state polls. They were national polls, and the national polls showed Hillary Clinton leading by approximately 3 percentage points. That's about what she won by, 3 percentage points. However, in order to find out in a close race like that, especially 3 percentage points. Now, I'm a longtime newspaper reporter, and we used to have a standing rule that if a poll was in the margin of error, you reported it as too close to call. You didn't say one person was going to win when poll was within the margin of error. And the 3 percentage points was within the margin of error in polling. But now we've turned around and said, whenever somebody's leading even by 1 point, they're leading. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean they're leading at all. If you're leading by 1 point, that could be you could be swinging 1 or 2 or 3 points either way on that. that's the polls are not particularly 100% accurate, and all polls are not equal. As I said, it all depends on who's doing the polling, how the questions are being asked, what the wording of the questions is, what the order of the questions is. All of those are factors. And it's one of the reasons why the Gallup poll got out of the election business. Because, hold on just a second, please. Excuse me, can I have something going on here in my house. Can you just hold on just a second?
Okay, we'll hold for just a minute. Okay, Bonnie, while he's doing whatever, see if you can clarify your question for me so I can ask it better when he gets back.
Okay, in 2016, the Electoral College asked for a briefing. Obama was willing to give it. Mitch McConnell said no. Considering the way the founders, from everything I've read of what Hamilton was writing about, and he wrote most of those Federalist Papers. In fact, he actually talked a delegate from Delaware to pull him back so that Jefferson won, because he didn't feel that Aaron Burr was fit for the office. But the problem is, I think, why can't these people get security clearance in advance so they can be briefed? There was a lot going on both sides, not just Hillary's emails, that they knew. So why not give them security clearance and let them be briefed if we're going to keep the Electoral College?
So you're saying have them be briefed on the facts that are happening at the time to determine fitness or unfitness?
I'm sorry.
Well, yes, especially if they've asked for it.
Okay. The briefing that Bonnie was talking about was on should they be briefed for fitness versus unfitness of the candidate and be able to swing the Electoral College vote for that. Is that right, Bonnie? Did I say it right?
I think so. I don't know. I'm having trouble right now with my screen. I've lost everything. But anyway, there I am.
I'm back. I'm sorry for this interruption. There's something going on here. It just so happens that somebody's over doing some work out in front of my house, and I have to. And I'm okay now.
So when I asked you Bonnie's question, the Electoral College asked for information in 2016. She was talking about the information about like Hillary's emails and things about Donald Trump. They were asking for a brief on fitness of the candidate, basically, and they'd be able to adjust their vote in the Electoral College that way. And she was wondering why we just don't give these people security clearances to hear these briefings and let that affect their vote.
Because then it would be overriding the people's vote. The people have made you want to do that after the fact. The people, people's vote has been made. I think that the reason why they didn't do it is because naturally power, this is politics. This is politics. And whoever's in control is going to do the thing that's going to benefit them, their party. Whoever's in control is going to do what they're going to benefit themselves. It's nice to think that ideally we're going to do it all straight, but that's the reality of it. And you see it going on right now in the Supreme Court nomination. It's power politics. It's all what's going on right now is power politics, and both sides are playing power politics. They did the same thing with the Kavanaugh nomination as well.
Okay.
In an ideal world, we'd like it to be that way, but it isn't that way. Politics is a pretty tough game.
Linda Holdage asks, has the map remained fairly stable over the past several months?
Yes, it's been fairly stable, yes. There's not been much change at all. And in the polling too, I think that in the polling, the polling has been relatively stable, although there's been a little narrowing in some of the battleground states. But Biden basically has, and I think I have some data where I can show some latest polls. Let's see if I can do that. Here we go. I'm sorry. Here we go. Let's look at the state of the race right now, okay? Here's the latest polls that we see from the various states. So here's a Florida poll. Trump versus Biden, Biden 47, Trump 51. That's a 4-point lead. That's a little bit, I would assume that the polls margin of error is 3 to 4%. So I would just still say they're neck and neck. Trump has an edge. But then another poll, that's an ABC Washington News poll, Washington Post poll. The next poll is a CNBC Change Research poll. And this one shows Biden up 49 to Trump 46, Biden by 3. So then you look at a third poll, the St. Petersburg Times poll. It's Biden 50, Trump 47. So you've got 3 polls, none of which agree with one another, 2 of which agree with one and 1 that doesn't. Now, the ABC Washington Post poll shows Trump up. The CNBC and the St. Petersburg Times poll show Biden up by 3. What do you conclude from that? You conclude that they're running neck and neck. That's the best you can say. Pennsylvania, Trump versus Biden. Biden 49, Trump 45. Biden by 4 in Pennsylvania. It's an important state. 4 is a little bit outside the margin of error, but still very close. Georgia, Trump 48, Biden 46. That's a surprise state there because Georgia has been mostly solid Republican. So you've got Trump up by 2 in there. He should be up there much more comfortably. He's not. That should be a worry for them. Wisconsin. This is a poll by CNBC and Change Research. As you see, these are different polling organizations that are doing these polls, and they're not going to be consistent sometimes. Biden 51, Trump 42. That's a 9-point difference in that particular poll in Wisconsin. And in Michigan, Trump versus Biden, NBC Change Research, Biden 51, Trump 43. That's 8 points. So those are states. Those are states that should have the Trump campaign really worried because of the fact that the margin is that big in those battleground states. You can hardly afford to lose both of those states. Arizona, Biden by 6. That's a bad one for Trump because of the fact that Arizona has been mostly Republican in most of its voting in the past presidential elections. And then you have a poll that's is meaningful. This is a poll that shows the national vote. Biden 49, Trump 42. Biden by 7. Again, what really matters is these polls in the battleground states and not necessarily the poll that shows the national poll. It was the national poll that Hillary Clinton won. Hillary Clinton didn't win the election. But any of these polls, now here's a Rasmussen report poll that shows only 1-point difference, but then you look at the Quinnipiac poll and that shows a 10-point difference nationally. And then you look at the CNBC poll, it shows a 9-point difference. And then you look at the USC, that's University of Southern California poll, it's 9-point difference. So that if you looked at those polls and you averaged up those national polls, 7, 1, 10, 9, 9, you'd probably come out with a lead of, Biden has a lead of about 8. So he's got a fairly comfortable lead nationally, no question about it. And nothing seems to be narrowing down at this particular time. I'm glad to go back to questions. Anybody have some questions?
Yes, hold on a second. I just have to get my question screen back up.
Okay.
How come some states divide up their electoral votes and others give all of their electoral votes based on the popular vote of the state?
Almost all of them do it, except for Maine is one of the few states that divides them up. That's why they do it. Power. They don't want to water down their power. They figure that if we give all our electoral votes, they're going to pay attention to us much more than if we split them up. Especially in a state like Maine, which is a small state in terms of electoral votes, you don't see a lot of candidates running up there to campaign.
Noah writes that both Maine and Nebraska can their votes.
Yeah, they split their votes. Nebraska is, again, it's not a large state. It doesn't have a lot of electoral votes to split, but they do split them up.
What about delays due to the counting of mail-in votes?
Yeah, the delays counting. Right now, people are predicting that we might not have a winner on election day because the mail-in votes will still have to be counted. We've seen in some of the primary elections that have been held this year, where mail-in votes have been heavy, that the winners of the primary elections have been delayed for as much as a week and a half after the primary election. I don't think it would be very good for the country if we have to wait after election, one more day after election day, to find out how the mail-in votes went. But it could happen, no question about it.
The last chart you showed had Biden at 222 on the Electoral College. How was that number determined?
By the number of electoral votes that they by the states that they think are safe for him at this particular time. The states that they are thinking that he's leading in pretty strongly, so they add them up. If it's not a toss-up state, they'll go back. If you want me to, do we want me to go back to that map? I can go back to that map.
Okay, while you're figuring that out,
yeah.
In this election, there are fewer third-party candidates, and in Michigan and Wisconsin, there is more evidence by Black representatives to work against similar 2016 Russian efforts to push Jill Stein over Hillary to punish the DMC, and this time not to stay at home and vote. And do you have any comments on that?
You know, they're free to do whatever they want in that particular case. When you have some of those third-party candidates in there, they can make a difference in close states. They definitely can make a difference in close states. Depends on who, you know, what kind of a campaign they're running and whether the main candidates are strong enough to be able to overcome that effort on the third-party candidates to win it. It's something that could be, third-party candidates can be spoilers in certain states. There's no question about it. Many people thought that in the 2000 election between Al Gore and George W. Bush, that what was the name? The consumer advocates, Ralph Nader, could have cost Gore the election in those states. But you have to make the assumption that the third-party candidates' votes are all going to go to one candidate or another, and you can't really make that assumption. Same thing with Ross Perot in 1992, when Ross Perot ran as a third-party candidate there. Many people assumed that he cost George Bush the election, but you can't really assume that every Ross Perot voter was going to be a George Bush voter. If they broke, they probably would have broken in the same percentages, my guess.
Do you have the state map?
I've got it up. I've got it on my screen.
Now click the share button.
Okay. What was our question here now?
Electors vote for who won the popular vote in their state. Is this because of state law or tradition?
Well, I think that it's tradition, but I think that there are some laws. Some states do have laws and others do not. But they can always change them if they want to.
Okay. Is the Republican about face on filling the Ruth Bader Ginsburg seat moving the polls?
Nothing that we've seen so far. The polls have not been moving an awful lot. A lot of people have made up their minds in this election. You don't see an awful large percentage of people undecided at this time, but they still could be pivotal. But we haven't had any polling that's new enough to make any determinations of whether Ruth Bader Ginsburg, one way or another, is moving the polls.
And another question, I would love to know which news source your class decides covered the election the best after the election.
Yeah, that's the interesting question. You know, the thing is that in my particular case, I read newspapers, print newspapers. I'm a dinosaur, I know, but I read print newspapers. I do not watch cable news of any kind, whether it be Fox News, whether it be CNN, or whether it be MSNBC. I just don't watch it. I don't watch it because I just don't need to hear that noise. And that's basically, as far as I'm concerned, most of it is noise. I do try to watch some once in a while on C-SPAN. I will turn them on C-SPAN when the candidates are doing a live speech. I want to hear that. I want to see the live speech. What they're saying in those live speeches and how the audiences are reacting to them. And I read print newspapers. And as I say, I've got right here, I have delivered to my house today.
Yes.
The Washington Post and the Washington Times. I got a conservative paper, the liberal paper, and I get a Wall Street Journal, which has a conservative editorial page, but in my estimation, the Wall Street Journal's day-to-day reporting of the news is about as straight as anybody does. They do a very good job. Now they have a very specialized audience, but they do cover politics. They do have an editorial page which leans conservative, but it's not. There's nothing radical or loud about the Wall Street Journal. And I think that, and I'm asking my students in my class at American U to study news organizations, newspapers. And they're not reading print newspapers. They wouldn't be able to get print newspapers, but they're reading them online. But I just want them to be able to see how a local news organization, as opposed to a Washington Post or a New York Times, covers the news of the election campaign. In many cases, if let's say that you're looking at a paper in Milwaukee. Well, the Milwaukee paper probably doesn't have a bunch of reporters from the Milwaukee paper going out on the campaign trail and covering the campaign. So that depending upon the wire services, the Associated Press primarily. And if the Associated Press is providing news, political coverage to the Milwaukee Journal, let's say, people who are reading the Milwaukee Journal are seeing Associated Press reports. And the Associated Press, because it has to serve so many news organizations across the country, has to be pretty straight. They probably, even now, if I'm looking at Associated Press reports, they do lean a little left, but they're pretty straight. The thing that kind of is amazing to me is that most of the young people that I see going into journalism in college today lean left. And they make no bones about it. When I was going to college back in the 1960s, if you were a journalism major, it was frowned upon for you to express your political views. It was frowned upon in class. It was frowned upon by your peers. You kind of kept your political views to yourself. That was for the political science majors. Now, I was kind of a hybrid, and I did both. I was a political science major and a journalism major at the same time. But today, young people are not reticent about expressing their own political views and having it color the way they write their news stories. And so we see a big change in business today in terms of reporting.
Okay, do you have anything else you want to present, or do you want to go back to questions?
Questions.
What are your thoughts on the Senate going Democratic?
Right now, I would think that it's a good chance of it going Democratic. If you look at some of the polls in some of the states, such as Arizona, where Republican incumbents are in trouble, I think it's very likely that they could go Democratic. Now, will the Ruth Bader Ginsburg, let's say that the Ruth Bader Ginsburg nomination of a successor to Ruth Bader Ginsburg goes through, and the Republicans are able to approve a nominee that Trump puts forth. Will that affect the elections out there? Well, it depends on when they do it, but right now that could be a big factor. Many of the people who are on the line, there's Susan Collins up in Maine, for example, is one who's running in a tight race right now, and her vote could be a big pivotal one if she were to vote for or against a nomination. So what happens with this whole Ruth Bader Ginsburg nomination could have a very big effect on the lineup of the Senate in 2021.
I have several questions about third-party candidates.
Sure.
Do you have any input on third-party candidates?
Go ahead. Do I have any? We have some third-party candidates out there right now. They're not getting much publicity out there. Naturally, the two parties are going to be making as strong a pitch as possible, knowing that some states are going to be very, very close. And if there are third-party candidates running in those states, they could swing the race either way, one way or another, for one of the candidates. So that the two major parties are going to have to be probably working very hard behind the scenes in their states to try to minimize the vote for any third-party candidates that might be on the ballot. I've not kind of studied third-party candidates at this stage of the game, but I'm going to have to take a look at it soon.
They keep asking, do you have anything else you want to present other than questions?
Do I have anything I wanted to present other than questions? Yeah, I have some things I want to present.
Okay, can we move along with that?
Sure. This is a chart from the Gallup poll, and it is their latest data on the issues. They asked the open-ended question. They've been asking this question every presidential cycle several times. And this is the latest one that was asked in the first part of September. What is the most important issue to you in this presidential campaign? The results are kind of startling because that's an open-ended question. They ask it right at the beginning. They don't ask. Gallup goes out and polls. When they poll, they aren't going to say, start talking about Donald Trump or Joe Biden, and then going out and ask you, what do you think is the most important issue? They're going to ask it right at cold. When you start the poll, they'll say, what do you think is the most important issue in the presidential campaign? And people will say, whatever it is that's on their minds. This year, for the first time in many years, Gallup is finding that the economic issues are not the most important issues that people are naming. If you look at that yellow line that you see on the screen, it says net economic problems. 19% of the voters say that economic problems are the biggest issue in the presidential campaign. Only 19%. Usually that number is always over 50%. People think that the economy is always that. Now, if you break it down, I got data that breaks it down by race, by age, by race, by age, by gender. Here he shows 19% of the people identify economic problems. And that goes down the line. It could be, some people say the economy in general, some people say unemployment, some people say lack of money, some people say the gap between rich and poor, some people say the federal budget deficit, some people say wage issues, corporate corruption. That's very small. Mainly, most people just say the economy in general and unemployment. All right, males are more concerned about the economy than females. Whites, 20%, non-whites, 14%, blacks, only 13%, Hispanics, 16%. It's not really a lot of variation over the race, other than whites saying the economy a little bit more. By age, 18 to 29-year-olds, 19% economy, 30 to 49-year-olds, 23%, 50 to 64, 16%, 65 and over 15%. So you see, and I'd like to ask people in general, why do you think that the economy is not such a big deal with most voters this presidential election? Anybody would like to chime in? I'd be glad to hear you. Nobody wants to. I can go down the
now
line.
I have a sea of hands. Hold on.
Okay, good.
You know, when did you say this poll was conducted?
Early this month, between the 8th and 15th of September.
Okay, so the reason the economy is not the issue, it's simply because COVID virus is the issue. If you solve that, then you solve going to school. If you solve that, then you can go to work and you can bring the economy up. So you got to prioritize your solutions.
Yeah, and the American people are, obviously. If you look down, now we go down to the non-economic problems. Now here we have the non-economic problems. 82% of the people cited non-economic problems as the problem, biggest problem.
Correct.
And coronavirus was named by 20% of the people. The government was named by 21%, 20% for the virus, race relations, 19%, lack of respect, 4%, unifying the country, 4%, crime and violence, 3%, healthcare, 3%, moral and ethical decline, family decline, 3%. So when you talk government,
the government is providing the money to keep the poor community afloat.
Okay.
The richer community doesn't have a problem economically. They have a health problem. Okay. And they don't have a work problem. They have a health problem.
Okay. Yeah, and it shows 20% of the people named coronavirus as the biggest problem facing the country in this election year. And it doesn't vary by race or age or anything. If you look across the line here, all the way across, the only place where coronavirus it goes from anywhere from 19% to 24%, 28%. Other people mentioned the coronavirus, so it's pretty across the board.
So the combination of the coronavirus and the government adds you up to almost 50%.
Why do you think that the government comes in there?
Because they're not solving the health problem.
Right. Okay.
And if they don't solve that, then both of them, that's 50% saying that you're not doing your job.
Right. That's a good point. Good observation.
Okay, I have 3 more people with their hands up: Lillian, Michael, and Dee Whitcomb. Does somebody want to add anything to that?
No, I was just gonna, before you scroll down, I was gonna say other problems. I think that people are so immersed in so many different issues, including COVID, as well as other things, that their mind has been diverted to the other things that are going on in the country. And I'm not surprised about this percentage, because it all folds into the COVID problem, because the economy was buzzing along pretty well until COVID came around. So it's not surprising.
Right. Good.
Yeah, this is Daryl Whitcomb. Can I speak?
Sure.
Yes, sir. Just observing all of this, another factor in all of this, I think, is the fact that the legislature, Congress rather, and the president signed huge spending bills, which are really pumping a lot of money through various programs into the population. So our power to consume has not reduced very much because money is flowing through. However, that may cause some problems with inflation in the out years. And another thing that people have kind of taken for granted here now is we have a very stable energy environment now. Gasoline prices have been very stable over the last year or so. And so we really haven't seen that much concern economically vis-a-vis this problem. And we've been focusing more on the virus.
Yes, that's a good point. I agree with you on that point. Yeah, people have not been the impact, the economic impact is of the whole virus thing has been borne primarily by the lowest income people. The upper income people, who are, especially those who are able to work online and not have to go to work, they're not worried too much about that. They're still making their money. They may not like the way they're working, and they may not like the inconvenience it causes in their families, but then they express their frustration when we come down here to the issues of coronavirus and the government not solving the problem of coronavirus. They think that the government should be doing more, or should have done it faster, or should have done it better. And there's all that. Then the race relation question comes in here. Just as many people who say coronavirus say race relations is a problem. Now, race relations, what does that mean? Some people may be saying race relations because they think that minorities are not getting their fair shake. There might be people who say race relations problem because they think that the rioting in the cities is something they don't like. You can't just say that they're all upset about one thing or another. Then you get the lack of respect issue and unifying the country issue. And all the thing that's interesting in this is, you would think that the news organizations that are covering this campaign would be gomming in on this data and saying, writing to us and telling us as voters, what's on their mind, why people are behaving the way they are, why people are angry about what they're reading Instead, we still try to write stories about issues that people don't really necessarily care about at this particular time, such as the healthcare insurance issue, or the decline of the family, or the police, even police brutality has not come up as a big deal in the poll. 2% of the people named police brutality is a big issue for them in the voting of the in the media, or illegal immigrants, environment, climate change. The media constantly write about the environment. Well, the environment doesn't matter to many people. People are really concerned about these things up here. They're concerned about the virus, and they're concerned about how the government is handling the virus. And they are concerned about race relations, but they're concerned about race relations because of the fact that it's in our psyche every day because of the news coverage of the unrest in various cities.
Do you have anything else you want to present, or do you want to answer questions?
I want to answer questions.
Okay. What are your thoughts on the delay in naming a victor in the presidential race due to mail-in ballots?
Yeah, well, yep. I think that it's going to be, we may see people fighting in the courts again over this whole thing. I was covering the 2000 campaign when the election was undecided, and we had to go to the Supreme Court to make a final decision. In fact, I was in Austin, Texas, on the night that the Supreme Court decision came down, covering George W. Bush. I was in front of the governor's mansion in Austin, Texas, along with another crowd of reporters who were there to watch to get the final news, and it was rain. I remember it was raining that night, and I saw we had just got the decision come down from the court, and we weren't clear as to what the decision meant. When we first read the decision, people didn't really understand what it meant, and then all of a sudden we saw the presidential limousine drive through the gate of the governor's mansion there, and we understood that obviously the reason why the presidential limousine was driven in there was because of the fact that the decision had been made. But anyway, we can have another situation like that. It was December 16th, as I recall, when we finally knew the election result between George Bush and Al Gore. Hopefully we won't come to that, but it's a real possibility. And if it is a real possibility, there's going to be an awful lot of unrest in the country in that period of time, I think.
Okay. I'm trying to figure this out. If the election goes to Biden, what do you expect from Trump?
I expect that if he's, I just don't think he'll contest it unless there's something to contest in court. You have to have some evidence to contest something in court. I think he'll walk away and go home. I don't think he's going to cause any trouble. He seems to be, he makes noise about the fact that he's not going to respect the results, but I think he will.
Do you think Bloomberg's paying for ads in Florida will have much of an effect?
Well, he didn't. He's paying for ads in favor of Joe Biden. He's not. He paid an awful lot of money, spent an awful lot of money of his own money for ads that didn't do any good when he was running for president in the Democratic primaries. But I think that everything helps. The more money you can pour into a battleground state, the better it'll be for that candidate. It depends on how effective his ads are and how good they are, and what he's pushing. And if he's pushing the right issue that Floridians care about, maybe it'll help.
Any thoughts about shy Trump voters affecting polling data?
Yes, I do have a concern about that, because there were a lot of shy voters in 2016 that didn't tell the pollsters that if keep in mind that these polls are done in very small numbers. They don't call the entire country to do a poll. They call a sample of approximately 1,100 people. And when you poll 1,100 people, and you call it, polling, first of all, polling is getting extremely difficult. The polling organization will tell you people don't answer their phones. The polling is done by phone, and people don't answer their phones because they have caller ID. If they see it's a number they are not interested in, they just don't answer their phone. In order to get a full sample that is a valid sample, people who are picked randomly to be called by the computer have to be called. Otherwise, the sample has to answer their phones. If they don't, they have to call them back. The rule is you call 3 times over 3 days. Usually polls go about 3 days. And over 3 days, they call 3 times. If they don't get the person that they're looking for, then they have to go to their backup sample. And then they have to go to a tertiary sample and a quadruple sample. And people who do polling will tell you it's harder and harder to get people to respond to the polls and get a valid sample. So that if you have people who do answer the phone and do want to give their answer, but they think that their answer is not politically correct, they'll lie. And right now, it seems to be not politically correct to say you're for Trump. And it's not politically correct, wasn't in 2016. So that there was a certain element of that. The Gallup people who I've talked to about that have told me that they think that there's always a percentage of people who just don't tell the pollsters the truth. And in the case of when one candidate is seen as being not quite politically correct, that number increases. So that there's really concern that maybe Trump is under polling. How much he's under polling, I have no idea. Is it enough to say, well, he really is ahead? I don't think so. But there is some under polling, I think, going on.
You have a couple of comments here about Bloomberg now paying the court costs of felons in Florida instead of advertisements in Florida to get them to vote Democratic.
I haven't heard that. I don't know if that may or may not be true. I haven't heard that, but that seems like an awful.
Several OLLI members seem to think it's true.
Well, it could be, and the thing is, that's an awful expensive way to buy votes. It seems to get people out of jail and then they can vote. I don't know how you can do that. You need a big organization to do something like that.
Do you feel that the public still has faith in the news media?
Well, people have faith in the news media that they consume. If they read a certain newspaper every day, they generally have good faith in it. They don't have good faith in it. So if people regularly watch Fox News on cable, they have faith in it. If they regularly watch CNN, they have faith in it. Do readers of New York Times have faith? I think people who consume a certain particular news medium have faith in that news medium that they follow. I don't think that they read a paper or go to a news source that they don't particularly trust or value and have faith in it. They go to the ones that satisfy them, and so therefore, and the ones that they don't like. So that when you poll somebody to say, "Would you have faith in the news media?" they think of the organizations they don't like. They say no. So you're going to get liberals who don't like Fox News saying they don't have faith in reporting, and you're going to get conservatives who don't like CNN saying they have no faith in reporting. It's an interesting bag out there, but the news media's credibility has dropped. There's no question about it. It's somewhere now. When you're ranking faith in institutions, they rank somewhere around 20%, 25%.
Okay, I've got several on polling here. One that asks about online polling, and another one that asks, what do you think do you think any polling is better than any other in the DMV?
I think that if polling that has been sponsored by major news organizations is usually good polls. News organizations go out and hire reliable pollsters, go over the questions that are being asked beforehand to make sure that there's no bias in the questions, and they spend good money at this. And then there's all kinds of polls, online polling. Well, online polling cannot be very accurate because online polling is only a poll of those people who are looking at that particular news website or whatever website and voting at that particular time. So it's representative of the people who are watching that news site at any particular time, but it's not necessarily an accurate sample of the people who are going to vote. It's an accurate sample of the people who are watching that news site. So online polls are just fun more than anything else. They're not meaningful. Question?
Okay, I just went through about 4 or 5 that are listing COVID as a major concern in this news election, which we've already covered. But they're asking, do you have a more, the Gallup poll that you had up was May 27th to June 4th. Do you have a more up-to-date
No, that
Gallup
was not.
poll?
No, that was not. That was not. That was September 9th to 16th.
Okay. And they were also the questions that were asking to see if there was a way they could see more of the data, like the race relations. What is that by demographic? And
I could go back to that if you wanted to go back to that.
that would be lovely.
Okay. Okay, race relations. Are you seeing the poll?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Here's race relations here. Now, demographics, this is race relations. 19% of the people identified race relations as a major concern. Now, if we go down, in order to see the breakdowns, all right, Black, going down this column here.
That was 49% in race relations.
Yeah, 45% of Black voters identified race relations as a major problem. 28% of white voters, and 15% of male voters, and only 24% of female voters. As I think you got there.
Another question: did climate change make the list?
No, environmental pollution is the one. Climate change did not make the list, or it's 2%. It comes under environmental pollution. It's not a big issue. It's a bigger issue in the media than it is in the public's minds, I guess. I don't know. But it's really, these numbers are very significant in that we usually have, the economy usually is always the biggest issue that people vote upon. People ask, how am I doing? How's my family doing? If I'm doing okay, well, that's a good sign. But people are concerned about a lot of other things. And again, this is a very unique year, no question about it. With the pandemic, it has upset everything, from economy to just daily life. People are frustrated with their daily lives in a lot of ways. So it comes out in various ways.
Okay, here's a comment. I've seen data that indicates the electorate is moving to the left, millennials and etc.
Yes.
Do you think this will be a major factor in the future?
Yes, definitely. If that trend continues, the country is moving to the left. More people identify. Still, I think I have a Gallup poll that I could probably pull up if it can. Stay with me for a minute. I think that there is a Gallup poll that has some data on that. Oh, well, here's an indicator right here. Which Democrats viewed as the party better able to handle the nation's top problems? This is a recent poll from Gallup as well, Politics, September 21st, 2020. So it's less than a week old. More Americans believe the Democratic Party, 47%, than the Republican Party, 39%, would do a better job of handling whatever issue they consider to be the most important problem facing the U.S. Americans' preferences on this question in presidential elections facing the U.S. Americans' preferences on this question in presidential election years have generally corresponded with the party that ultimately won the election. In other words, if you said Democrats are better able to handle problems, the Democrat wins, and Republicans are able to better handle the problem, the Republican wins. And it says, in fact, in all but 2 presidential elections in Gallup records, the party leading on this measure has ended up winning the presidency. The exceptions were 1980, when the parties were tied, and in 1948, when Harry Truman scored a comeback victory after trailing in the polls most of the year. The question was not asked in 2000. So which party can handle the problem they consider most important? In 2020, Democrats lead by 47 to 39. If history is any indicator, it would indicate that the Democrats would win the presidential election. In 2016, when Trump won, the Republican Party was named as the party that can best handle the problem they consider most important. And in 2012, the Democrats by a 10-point margin, and Obama won. In 2008, Democrats by a 7-point margin, Obama won. In 2004, the Republican George Bush by 3 percentage points over 44, he won. And in 2000, they said they didn't do the poll that year for some reason. I don't know why. 1996, that was the year that Bill Clinton was reelected, 41 to 37 for the Democrats. 1992, it was a big gap, 40 to 34 for the Democrats. Bill Clinton beat George H.W. Bush. In 1988, you see there was the opposite. George H.W. Bush won that election, 38% to the 33. And in 1984, it was Reagan in a landslide. He had a big gap on 11 points over Walter Mondale. And then in 1980, which was a close election up to the end, it was 33 to 33. Reagan wins. Jimmy Carter won in 76. Democrats were up. Richard Nixon won in 72. Republicans were up. 68. Nixon won there. Republicans were up. And in 64, the Democrats, Johnson won. Democrats were up. So you can see from the history here that indicator is a very, very strong, reliable factor in determining who's going to win the election. So if you take this number this year for 47 to 39 as an 8-point gap, it looks like the Democrats going to win the election.
Do you think the debates could make a significant difference in the vote?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I think they do. They always do make a difference in a race that's relatively close. The candidates, it cuts as a double-edged sword. It can work against a candidate. It can work for a candidate. In 2016, the debates between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton were not conclusive, but Donald Trump was thought to, going in, Donald Trump was thought to be going to be the loser, and he never really was the big loser. He didn't do well in one of them or two of them, but he didn't do badly either. The thing is, you don't want to be so obvious that you were not good, that it caused people to change the vote. But I think that in this particular case, people are anxious to see Joe Biden and Donald Trump side by side. It's the only time that the voters see the candidates side by side is in those 3 debates. The first one is coming up next Tuesday, and they will make judgments based upon what they see in those things. I think they're very important in people making judgments. So that if Donald Trump were to do badly or Joe Biden were to do badly, I think it would hurt. Each one has a certain threshold that they have to cross, that the experts have set up for them, and that their voters have set up for them. Everybody wants to know whether Donald Trump is going to be too aggressive and too nasty to Joe Biden. Everybody wants to know if Joe Biden is going to be able to stand up to Donald Trump and not get tongue-tied. There's all kinds of things that could go wrong for each of the candidates. Going back to the 2000 election between Al Gore and George W. Bush, people will remember that the candidates that Al Gore got in George Bush's face at one point. Got up and walked right up to his face. That didn't go over well with a lot of voters. Gore was a little too aggressive, and people didn't think that was a good thing to be. Things can, there are memorable moments from many of the debates. Going back to the first debate between Richard Nixon and John F. Kennedy, people remember that Nixon did not look good. John F. Kennedy wore makeup. Nixon did not. Nixon looked like he was sweating. John F. Kennedy did not. Nixon wore a light suit and Kennedy wore a dark suit. Don't forget there was no color television at that time. And so the impressions are important. People get impressions of the two candidates. So both of the candidates this time push Trump and Biden have thresholds that they need to meet to not lose support. The name of the game of the debates is not to lose support. You don't necessarily think you're going to gain support from a debate, but you don't want to lose it. You don't want to do something that will cause people who thought they were going to vote for you not vote for you.
If the election is not decided on election night, who makes the decision?
Well, the decisions are made by the electoral, by the each individual state, which has its own board of elections, which makes a decision for each state. If those things go to court, if people contest the results in court, the courts can end up making decisions. That's what ended up happening in 2000. The Supreme Court decided the election of 2000. Hopefully it won't come to that this time around, but and I don't think it will, but it could. Question?
Hello, I got a question.
Yes.
Much has been made about Trump's reaction to the election if he loses and whether or not he will accept that. But let's turn the issue around and look back in 2016 when Trump won. Hillary never really accepted his court victory. How do you see it if Trump does win? How will Biden handle this?
I think that the Democrats, if they think that there's something to challenge, will challenge it all the way to the courts if they can do that. I don't think that they're going to be willing to accept a second defeat by Donald Trump. There's going to be a lot of fighting. I think that it's only my own gut reaction. I think that unless it's if the race is close and Trump wins, the Democrats are going to fight it like hell. And if the race is close and Trump and Biden wins, the Republicans are going to fight it like hell. We need a clear decision here to avoid that kind of thing. But if it's a really close thing, it's going to be a battle. Whoever is seen as the loser is going to fight like hell to not lose.
Okay, Ginge, you're up next. I'm not hearing the speaking so much.
Is dependent on it will be.
She's saying, what do you think about Sinclair owning so many news outlets?
Yeah, I got it. She's concerned about certain news organizations not playing certain stories because they control the news organizations, those local media. Yeah, that's a problem. That can be a problem if the news organization decides that they don't want to particularly cover some aspect of the news that they don't want, that they don't like. It's within their power to do that. Now, how can we stop newspapers from chain newspapers, chain news organizations? We can't. It's almost impossible to stop it. First of all, news organizations today are, especially newspapers, are really in financial difficulty. They're not making any money at all. If they are making money, it's only because they're part of a chain that is keeping them afloat. And so therefore, it's the only way to survival is that kind of chain ownership. Gone is the day where somebody owned one newspaper and then that was it. I mean, think back to the Washington Post is a perfect example. The Washington Post was owned by the Graham family for a long, long time, but it sold out because they just knew that the handwriting was on the wall as far as a profit statement was concerned. And they sold out to the owner of Amazon, Jeff Bezos, who has bought the Washington Post for $250 million and basically has put an awful lot of extra money into that operation and not only keeping it afloat, but even expanding it. But it's not because the Washington Post is making money hand over fist. It's because they're being subsidized by a very wealthy, deep pockets owner. The reality of news today is that unless you're owned by a chain or a group of people who a conglomerate where big money can be brought to bear, you're not going to survive. It's as simple as that. So chain ownership is something that is not the best, but it's the best we've got.
All right, Del, go ahead and ask your question.
The president and his campaign evidently would like the Supreme Court justice nomination and projected confirmation to distract from the pandemic issue. How effective do you think that's going to be in terms of the turnout, in terms of how it will affect the results on November 3rd?
Hard to predict it, but it's going to be a big deal. I mean, the media are going to are already making a big deal of this whole Supreme Court mechanism that's going on. Ruth Bader Ginsburg died over the weekend, or was it Monday? I forgot. But here it is. 3 days. We're 3 or 4 days away from it, and everything is in turmoil. Will they do it? Will they not do it? If they do it, will it impact? I think on that particular issue, the Democrats are still already in their corner, and it's not going to change many votes. On the Republican side, I think the Republicans will want the president to fight for that nomination. Will it change votes either way? I don't think so. I think that Republicans will be happy with him doing it. The Democrats will be unhappy, and it could come out in the polls in the voting. I don't think it's a pivotal issue. I think it's just one more issue that makes an awful lot of noise, but doesn't change the needle very much.
Nancy, go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, I was interested in the Electoral College. When you put that chart up, and I guess either I need the website or maybe you can explain it. When you showed the Biden chart in Trump, where it showed, the ones that were in Biden's corner and the ones that were leaning towards Biden, when I added it up, I get to like 160 or something like that. But the chart says 222. So I was trying to wonder, are they putting some of those ones that you had, the gray ones, are they putting those into his? Because somehow it cuts off the top of the chart, I think was where it shows that, where it showed the 222. Are they adding something else? Are they adding some of those gray states to Biden? I didn't understand that.
They're adding all the states blue, dark, medium, and light.
I did that, and it doesn't come to 222. That's what I'm saying. I don't understand that chart.
Where does it come to? Do you know?
Realclearpolitics.com.
Yeah, realclearpolitics.com. It
adds up to 222.
I couldn't get it, so that maybe it was too fast. I'll go back and look at it.
Is
that what it's trying to do? It's trying to add up the ones that are not. They're not counting any of the gray ones, perhaps. Right. Okay, all right. That's my question. I'll go back and look at it and see if I can figure out
one for the toss-up
for me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Back to the issue of the electors. According to the Constitution, quite honestly, it used to be that the electors could really vote for whomever they wanted to. And in fact, in the 2016 election, we had, I think, 3 faithless electors for Trump, and we had like 8 for Hillary. And each state handled that in its own way. If I'm not incorrect, about 6 months to a year ago, there was a federal court ruling out of the Supreme Court declaring that the states now have the right they can demand that those electors do in fact vote as the state dictates them to vote.
Mm-hmm. I'm not up to speed on that, but I assume you're correct. But yeah, there were a few faithless electors last time. Generally, the electors take a pledge to vote the way that state votes.
Yeah, but now, as I understand it again, in this court ruling that came out, they specified that the states could in fact dictate that the electors that they do select will in fact vote as the state directs them to vote, which is normally what their popular vote gives them.
I don't know. I'm not familiar with that, but you may be a little bit right. But ask them before they get appointed, ask them to take a pledge not to vote. Is that what you're saying?
No, that's under state law now. State law can direct that they will in fact do that.
And direct them to do it. Plus, each state, all states are one of some of the states.
No, it'll be federal. It's a federal
federal case.
Federal directive. Yeah,
Okay.
it applies to all
Okay.
states.
Okay. So that each state electors have the obligation to vote the way the state voted.
Yes, and of course we do have this movement going on now, trying to pass this law where each state will direct that its electors will vote in accordance with the national popular vote. And I think there are well over 200 electoral votes now represented by the states that have already approved that piece of legislation.
If that ever goes in, you're going to we'll have court fights going on forever.
That's true. I agree.
Okay, I'm going to have Mr. Benedetto give his last thoughts, and then we're going to have to end this because I've got another Zoom coming up.
Okay. All right. Well, this has been a good session. I think I really enjoyed your questions, and you really kind of taxed me into really picking my brain to talk about these things. My closing thoughts. This race, I believe this race still could be reached. I don't assume that Biden's got it in his pocket yet. He may soon have it in his pocket. We'll know more after the first debates to see if anything changes. If things start to seem pretty much the same after the first debate, I think that this is probably going to be a Biden victory. There's an awful lot of unrest in the country, and usually when there's a lot of unrest in the country, the incumbent usually takes the blame, whether it's their fault or not. But there is an awful lot of unrest in the country right now. But the fact is that the reporting. I find that the reporting on the campaign is too horse race and not enough of really what's really on the voters' minds. The vote is with the people, and what the people are thinking is the most important. So that most of the reporting that I like to do at this particular stage of the election is talk to voters in the swing states and see what's on their minds. We don't do enough of that. But this has been a great session. I've enjoyed being with you. We'll see, maybe next spring we could do another thing after we know the results of the election, and we could do another thing about what happened.
All right. Thank you very much, and we'll look forward to the next class.
Thank you. Bye now.